Austria-Hungary and Germany were allied against the other great power bloc, Russia and France. War between Austria and Serbia would mean war between Austria and Russia. That would mean war between Russia and Germany. That would mean war between Germany and France. And that might mean war between Germany and Britain. Over a few days in early August 1914, the nations of Europe fell into war. August the 1st, Germany declared war on Russia. August the 3rd, Germany declared war on France, deciding to invade her old enemy through the neutral country of Belgium. The Germans faced the problem of a war on two fronts. In the east against Russia, and in the west against France. Some years before war broke out, they had devised a plan to deal with this, the Schlieffen Plan. It was a brave gamble. They calculated that Russia would be slow to get its forces together, so this would give them a few weeks to defeat France. They would attack through Belgium to avoid French defences and be in Paris in 3 weeks. That way France would be defeated, and they could turn all their forces to deal with the huge Russian army. The Germans didn't expect Britain to get involved. Britain had a treaty to protect Belgium, but this was signed way back in 1839. The Kaiser didn't think Britain would go to war over a scrap of paper. In any case, compared to Germany, he felt Britain had a contemptibly little army.
The Treaty of Versailles was originally based around Woodrow Wilson's 14 points and included numerous different components intended to restrict Germany's capability to start another war, as well as cripple her economy and the nation as a whole. Some of the main reasons included the war guilt clause, which forced Germany to claim full responsibility for starting the war. Restrictions were placed upon the size of German army. Poland was created, as well as the nations Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. Finally, the League of Nations was formed, which was to be somewhat of a global police, which was to have a representative from each nation so that conflicts would be resolved through diplomacy as opposed to war. Marxism. Number 1, classless society. Number 2, government owns and distributes means of production, labor, and product. Number 3, last of the definite stages. Primitive, slavery, feudalist, and capitalist, socialist, and communist. 4, utopian if perfected. 5, devoid of exploitation. 6, devoid of alienation. World War I. World War I was an extremely bloody war that engulfed Europe from 1914 to 1919. With huge losses of lives and little ground lost or won. Fought mostly by soldiers in trenches, World War I saw an estimated 10 million military deaths and another 20 million wounded. While many hoped that World War I would be the war that ends all wars, in actuality, the concluding peace treaty would set the stage for World War II.
In 1929, years of booming prosperity ended in catastrophe. It was the biggest stock market crash since records began.
It is impossible to underestimate the shock, a sense of stunned disbelief.
First-time investors borrowed huge amounts of money to speculate on the market.
The market broke very sharply and a lot of people were wiped out with it. It was very painful.
Later, Thousands of banks failed. Millions lost everything.
The poverty was really all around us. It was really, really pitiful.
The crash was followed by a depression that spread across the world, lasted for a decade, and was a prelude to war. This is the story of a financial disaster that we hoped would never happen again. The Great Depression would last until the outbreak of World War II. Then, as now, the globalized economy meant that the crash and subsequent depression rippled out across the world. In Britain, there was a slump in manufacturing, and millions lost their jobs. Germany, still suffering from defeat in the First World War, was hit even harder.
So many people had their life savings destroyed during the Great Depression that it created in many countries a desire for some authoritarian government that would save them, that would rescue the economy.
No doubt the crash and the Depression strengthened anti-capitalist movements. The communists had taken over in Russia, and there were rising fascist movements. Mussolini was already in power in Italy, and Hitler's political base was growing in Germany. And when American-style free market capitalism suffered from this Wall Street crash followed by a depression, it just strengthened those people who wanted to say, there's a better way.
While communism and fascism prospered, many nations put up barriers to prevent free trade and turned inwards in an attempt to save their economies. Economic nationalism led to trade wars and later world war.
To a form of government in which the ruler is an absolute dictator. Ultimately, the movement revolves around the idea of complete power and control. Totalitarianism is a political system where the state in control believes everything is possible. The main phenomenon of totalitarianism is that you are told what to believe. Fascism is described as a system in which the state not only is authority which governs and molds individual wills with laws and values of spiritual life, but it is also power which makes its will prevail abroad. For the fascists, everything is within the state and neither individuals nor groups are outside the state. For fascism, the state is an absolute, before which individuals or groups are only relative. Democracy is a process of self-government in which individuals operate upon their environment directly and indirectly. Directly, as they make decisions for themselves, pursue careers, enter into relationships with others, and otherwise live their lives indirectly through political representatives accountable for them. The Great Depression. The Great Depression plunged an American people into an economic crisis unlike any other endured in this country before or since. The worst and longest downturn in our economic history threw millions of hardworking individuals in poverty, and for more than a decade, neither the free market nor the federal government was able to restore our prosperity.
Eigene Arbeit, eigenen Fleiß, eigenen Entschlossenheit, eigenen Trotz, eigene Beharrlichkeit.
War with Germany was done.
causes were militarization and economic expansion of Germany, Japan, USA, and USSR, rise of fascist government in Europe, Treaty of Versailles, which was seen as unfair by Germany, the need for Lebensraum and area for economic expansion by Germany and Europe, and the same for Japan and Asia. The other countries either had enough land of their area, the USA and the USSR, or colonial empires, Britain and France. Short-term immediate causes: invasion of Poland by Germany in 1939, invasion of Russia by Germany in 1941, preemptive strike on Pearl Harbor by Japan in 1941. Major strategies: naval landings, a large thing in the Pacific, and the way the Americans stated their campaigns in the European/Mediterranean theater. Torch Husky Neptune, the real name for D-Day, for example. Air assault, attacks from the air on the ground forces like what our carriers did in the Battle of Turk Atoll, or dropping men in behind enemy lines, invasion of Crete, Market Garden. Blitzkrieg, a fast-moving assault that bypasses fortified positions and strike deep into the enemy. This was the main idea German style, and the German army was basically based on this type of warfare. Combined arm tactics is not what I call a strategy, but more of a law of conducting modern war. Everything is used to support everyone and remove the weakness of the other. Tanks are great at fighting pillboxes and more fortified positions, but they are weak by themselves against infantry that can get on top and drop a grenade in them. Having their own infantry keeps that from happening. Strategic bombing, used to destroy important things behind lines like factories, rail lines, roads, etc. Siege warfare, encircles the enemy and slams them until they submit you for fail. Stalingrad, Leningrad, and Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge. Carrier action. Aircraft from the carriers attack naval forces, main form of naval battle in the Pacific. Naval line, older style used in gunship action. Battle of Denmark Strait, Bismarck and P versus the Prince of Wales and Hood, and the Southern Force versus Fifth Fleet's battleships in the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Defensive action, hold the line and then counterattack. Kursk is the best. Some of the major battles of World War II were the Battle of Britain, Battle of Stalingrad, Operation of Barbarossa, Battle of Midway, Battle of Kursk, and these battles were important because each of them were long, grueling battles that in the end changed the war in favor.
At the end of the Second World War, and emerging from nearly 4 decades of brutal Japanese occupation, the Korean peninsula found itself torn between 2 foreign ideologies, from the Soviet Union and the United States. Following Japan's defeat in 1945, the Soviet Union occupied the communist wing of the Korean resistance, all of the land north of the 38th parallel, while the United States occupied Korea south of the line. The Communist North was equipped with over 200,000 armed veterans who fought alongside Mao Zedong's Chinese Red Army against the Japanese, and then against Chiang Kai-shek in China's own bloody civil war. Their leader was Kim Il-sung, who saw the United States appointing former Japanese collaborators to top leadership positions in the South. His intent was to unite Korea under one communist ideology. By contrast, the unstable South was ill-equipped to defend itself compared to the battle-seasoned and well-supplied North. From 1945 to 1950, the South, under the leadership of Syngman Rhee, suffered massive civil unrest, often dealing with popular demonstrations with violent police retaliation, employing tactics reminiscent of the Japanese occupation. Following years of cross-border raids and skirmishing along the 38th parallel, Kim Il-sung invaded the South on June 25, 1950, behind a barrage of artillery fire. Syngman Rhee was forced to flee Seoul 2 days later. On the 3rd day of fighting, the South bombed the bridge crossing the Han River and were in full retreat from the North's advance. On the day of the invasion in 1950, the United Nations Security Council in New York roundly condemned North Korea's action, with veto-wielding Russia infamously absent from the session. 2 days later, Security Council Resolution 83 was passed, recommending UN member states assist South Korea militarily. And with that, American President Harry Truman ordered the U.S. Navy and Air Force, based mostly in Japan at the time, into action on behalf of the South. Less than 2 months since the invasion began, Kim Il-sung had driven the South Korean and U.S. forces to Pusan in the southeast corner of the peninsula, and was expecting an imminent and total victory in the war. At the time, China decided to position more than 250,000 of its troops along its Korean border, should the conflict escalate and the North's advance be repelled. After weeks of fighting around Pusan,
causes of the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union represent two opposing systems of government. The United States wanted to encourage free trade throughout the world. The Soviet Union wanted to shield off her own sphere from the international commerce. After the Second World War, with the decline of Europe, power was largely shared between the Soviet Union and the United States. As one wanted to dominate the other, conflicts were inevitable. Significance of the Iron Curtain. The Iron Curtain symbolized the ideological conflict and physical boundary dividing Europe into two separate areas from the end of World War II in 1945 until the end of the Cold War in 1991. The term symbolized efforts by the Soviet Union to block itself and its dependent and Central European allies off from open contact with the West's non-communist areas. Significance of the Cuban Missile Crisis. It nearly leads to a nuclear annihilation of the world in a war between the USA and the USSR. Many U.S. politicians and military officials advocated military strikes on the missile sites we discovered on Cuba. Others advocated an invasion of Cuba, and others advocated a blockade, which we eventually decided to do. Some even advocated a full-scale war with the USSR. It ended with the USSR pulling missiles out of Cuba publicly, and the USA pulling missiles out of Turkey secretly.
The Cold War was the result of political conflict, military tension, and economic competition after World War II. The Cold War lasted from 1945 to 1991. Hey dummy, we have 50 years to cover, so sit back, relax, and prepare to get schooled.
Vietnam War. Reasons for the war were for the Vietnamese to become an independent nation. They had to fight the French in the U.S. The elections, promised by the Geneva Convention in July 1954, were never held for the Vietnamese to unify the country. They had to fight the corrupt dictator's Diem corrupt regime, and the American politicians and military invented a domino theory, which falsely stated that if one nation fell to communism, the other would fall like dominoes. The outcome of the war was for Vietnam. The outcome was a victory for the communists, who took control of North Vietnam and South Vietnam. Guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla warfare was a form of irregular warfare in which a small group of combatants, including but not limited to armed civilians, and used military tactics such as ambushes, sabotage, raids, petty warfare, an element of surprise, and extraordinary mobility to dominate a larger and less mobile traditional army, or strike a vulnerable target and withdraw almost immediately. The Cold War. Nuclear arms race. The nuclear arms race was a competition for supremacy in nuclear warfare between the United States and the Soviet Union and their respective allies during the Cold War. During the Cold War, in addition to the American and Soviet nuclear stockpiles, the other countries developed nuclear weapons, though not engaged in warhead production on nearly the same scale as the two superpowers. Communism. By the 1980s, it was pretty obvious that communism in the USSR was not really working out. Mikhail Gorbachev became the leader of the USSR in 1985, and he introduced many reforms in an attempt to modernize the economy and make the Communist Party more democratic. All that this led to was the breakup of the USSR and the end of the one-party communist rule, as well as the collapse of the well-known Iron Curtain and the end of the communist rule.
Over here. Hey! There's gotta be people hurt up! Oh my God. Come on. We've had an attack. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Current events, and a few of the main current events were the two that I'm going to talk about, and the first one is the Boston Marathon bombing. Some of the things you need to know about the Boston Marathon terror attack. It was on April 15, 2013. Double bombings near the finish line of the Boston Marathon killed 3 people and injured at least 264. The victims, one of them was named Martin Richard. He was 8 years old, a student at the Neighborhood House Charter School in Boston. The other one was Crystal Campbell, 29, of Medford, Massachusetts. Lingzai Liu, a graduate student at Boston University, and she was originally from China. Some other facts about the bombing was the bombs exploded 12 seconds apart near the marathon's finish line on Boylston Street. According to Richard Deslauriers, the special agent in charge of the FBI's Boston office, the bombs contained BB-like pellets and nails. One of the bombs was contained in a pressure cooker hidden inside a black backpack, according to FBI. The FBI says that the second bomb was also in a metal container, but they haven't determined if it was also in a pressure cooker. The Department of Homeland Security issued a warning in 2004 about pressure cooker bombs. Instructions for making this type of explosive are widely available on the internet.
Sharp new warning of all-out war. For the first time, the mysterious and secretive nation has threatened a preemptive nuclear strike against the U.S. It comes as the UN approves tough new sanctions. So how dangerous is the situation? What countermeasures could America take? Here's ABC's chief global affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz.
Thousands upon thousands of North Koreans rallied today around a North Korean general delivering that stunning threat. A first-strike nuclear attack with a vow to engulf Washington, D.C. in a sea of fire.
They're threatening a nuclear preemptive attack. Never done that before.
The young North Korean dictator, despite the diversion of Dennis Rodman's visit, now lashing out against the U.S. and South Korean military exercises and today's new stiff UN sanctions. Analysts say North Korea is still years away from perfecting a nuclear weapon, but they are getting closer all the time.
The threat of a preemptive strike on the United States, even if that's not possible now, is terrifying.
You have to take this seriously.
North Korea does not yet have a missile capable of hitting the continental U.S., but America has satellites in space, radars at sea and on the ground, designed to detect a missile launch. Then dozens of intercepting missiles could be fired from California or Alaska to take out enemy missiles, even nuclear ones, before they reach America. But the system is far from foolproof. However, the most immediate threat tonight from North Korea is far more conventional. They could fire on South Korea, America's ally, like they've done before.
This is how wars start. Threats become maneuvers, become exchanges, are met with retaliation. Pretty soon you have World War I or Vietnam.
And there is renewed concern tonight about mobile missile launchers in North Korea, which could fire rockets capable of hitting South Korea. There is nothing imminent, but these threatening statements have everyone on edge. Diane.
All right, Martha Raddatz, thank you so much.
What I'm going to talk about is the North Korea. After weeks of hurling threats at the United States and its allies, North Korea announced Tuesday it will restart a nuclear reactor it had shut down more than 5 years ago. The declaration demonstrates Kim Jong's UN's commitment to the country's nuclear weapons program that the international community has tried without success to persuade it to abandon. The North state-run Korea Central News Agency reported that the reclusive state's atomic energy department intends to readjust and restart all the nuclear facilities at its main nuclear complex in Yongbyon. Those facilities include a uranium enrichment facility and a reactor that was mothballed and disabled. Under the agreement reached in October 2007 during talks among North Korea, the United States, and 4 other nations. The announcement was followed by a plea for calm from the United States Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who is himself South Korean. He said he was deeply troubled.